Okay, so we move on to the next section of the tutorial, and this one deals with the component constructor, which is basically a function of React that allows the component to keep a state. We will be talking more about the object called state later on in another tutorial. I think in the next lesson or two. In the meantime, just know that, let's say that, what is a state? I mean, is your computer on? Is your computer off? Well, that would, explain sort of what a state is. It's either on or off, or maybe it's a certain color, and that's the sample, keeping on with the car and metaphor that we've been using so far programming. We are going to basically set up this special value, or as a variable, or as a state rather, that tells the program what state something is in. So it sets up a class just like we did before, with the car is extended to the React component, and we're going to be telling it to render some HTML. The constructor is stated as constructor, the void symbol, the two parentheses. Bracket then gives us the super, which is used in every instance here. And like I said, we'll talk more about this property, method rather, in a little bit. But this state is equal to whatever your state is. In this case, it will be a red color. So when we render I am a car, that's all we expect to see. But if we use this new state, we can then tell it to repeat, or rather finally render, even if it's for the first time, what the state may be. So I expect that if I have a HTML sentence like this one, this statement will say as a header to I am a red car, and we could change the value of red to something else, or the program could. Let's run the sample to see what's going on with the code. There's two files. There's the index.html, our index page, which will eventually reveal what the HTML is. It still depends mostly on this division. I'll copy that for now. Don't need to worry too much about everything else here, although I don't know if you've been noticing, although I've been using a very quick to put together kind of file, everything else is important in HTML, telling it what kind of document it is, what language. The meta information here actually will make it appear regular on any screen size, especially on a handheld device. So don't take that for granted, even though I'm taking shortcuts here to accelerate and just sometimes only type the body. Index.js is the JavaScript that it will be using. The constructor will be changing the state of the element, and will display an HTML page in the end. So that's the big thing about React. Is actually everything happens in JavaScript, so it's a lot easier to program. It doesn't depend so much on the HTML, except just to say, hey, this is where the code goes. So I'm going to open up a new CodePen, codepen.io, move this a little bit out of the way, and then create a new pen. And I'll title this as, let's call it component, or maybe constructor. Constructor should do fine. I'm going to hide the CSS since I will be using that less than the others. Trying to see if give me a little bit more space here with the letters. So here's HTML, and something that I just said, well, maybe you want to use all the code. If you're in CodePen, if you type in the exclamation point as you're writing an HTML document, it will give you access to a pre-written HTML document. So if you press tab, it will actually accept all of that. This is very familiar to what W3 Schools uses. The one thing that I don't like, though, is that for whatever reason it gives you an error and basically says just HTML that goes in the body goes here. And you can, if you do this, you can go and read what the learn more is, but basically they're telling you that you don't need to declare a dog type, which we haven't. Just would be nice that we could keep it, but I'll delete it just so that we can move on. Everything else, like I said, it's similar to what W3 School does. It declares that the language is English. It says that the viewport is accessible to all devices. We don't need a title because we can't see it, but you can put one if you want, but it won't show up. And then we have the body. And inside of the body, which is usually what we're concerned with, I'm going to paste that code that I copied, the division with the root, since it will be needed eventually. I'm going to give myself a little bit more space on the JavaScript window, but not before deleting that HTML, or do I have to? I guess I don't have to because it's already declared at the top, but so I will give myself more space on JavaScript. I'll save just to make sure that it's there when I need it, which will be shortly. And to get the constructor code going, let's first change the settings, as we often do with the JavaScript. Make sure that we have a Babel preprocessor, and we search the CDN here for React, which is just this one, the React, and then we'll search for React again, but find React DOM. Turns out that if you do React DOM first and then React after, that might give you some problems. So if you've been doing React followed by React DOM, great. I'll save and close. And let's look at the code that we're going to be typing. We don't need the imports because we just established that in the settings. We are going to create a class called car. We will have a constructor with the super state being red, and we will render this as an H2. So in the JS, I can start to type. First of all, give me the class. That will be car. That needs to be a capital C, and this extends the React component with a capital letter on the C. Open up the braces, and that will take us to the actual constructor, which takes a void parentheses, and then a bracket, again a brace actually, and here we type in super with void, semicolon to go to the next line, and this state equals, and we bracket the code, which is a CSS statement, color colon red. Well, I shouldn't say that it's a CSS statement, but that is what it looks like. But the color defines the state as being red. And we'll put in a semicolon to end that. I need this bracket in the next line, but I can press enter after it to tell it to then render, and render whatever it's got with the void, and then open up another brace and tell it to return a value. Return, and it's returning it as a header 2. So there's an H2 with the text I am a, and then bracket this dot state dot color, and the bracket ends it there. After that, I'll put in a space and say car exclamation point, and then I think we can we close it here? Well, we can close the tag with left bracket slash H2 to tell it that's where the header 2 ends, and semicolon, that's where the line ends. The next line already has the brace to close the argument. I'll go to the end and give myself a little bit of space, and then call the React DOM dot render, and this will try to render inside parentheses, left angle bracket, uppercase C for car, space because there's only one thing that we're calling, and slash, and then close the angle bracket, comma, document dot get, capital E for element, and properly spelled, element, and then by, capital B, lowercase y, capital I and lowercase d for ID, and in parentheses inside of a single quote, this is root. The semicolon at the end then will say that's the end of the code. And we get the result, I am a red car, on the right side. Now this is interesting. I misspelled constructor here and it still did it. I wonder if it's one of those where doesn't matter what it's called, but nonetheless it should be called constructor. And sure enough, it says that I am a red car, and because this is a state that's being defined by us at this moment, maybe, like I said, maybe later on the program itself will do it, we can say, well, what if we change this from red to blue? Then our results should say, I am a blue car. Okay, so that's the constructor. I'm going to save and move on to the next one. I can close this sample and talk about props. And it's another way of handling component properties. So we've already told it what the state was. In this case, this instance, it was red. Like I said, it could be on or off. But then we have other properties. That's where props come in. And they'll be talking more about props in the next few tutorials. Let's go ahead and do the sample. We're going to use an attribute to pass a color to the car component, which is very much like the one we just did, which is telling it that the car is red, or as we did, change it to blue. Since we're going to be talking more about props later, I'm going to just begin by, well, I'll just run the sample. I'll begin by copying the class all the way down to the rent-s to the code, copy that, come back to my code pen, and at the very end, after the last semicolon, I'll press enter once. I'll put in a couple of dashes there just to let me know that that's where I should be pasting. These are just remarks, comments. I'll paste, and we get the whole code from the other one, but rather than using constructor, it's using props. So let's see, we're gonna, rather than using car, since we're already using it, I'm gonna say car2 like we did before. That extends React component. I see that this one now, the old one, rather appears and tells me that it's still running the blue part. It's going to render another message that is saying that I am a this props, whatever the properties are, type of car. As we go back to the actual render, we'll say that it's a red car because we already have a blue car. And we'll say, well, get the element by root 2. And actually before that, let's say that we're using the car2 class. I copied too much. I shouldn't have that localhost there, so I'll delete it. I'll scroll back up. Actually, I'll just leave it there where I am, because now in order to see the red car, I need to go to the HTML, which actually displays these things. I'm going to copy my line 7, which is trying to display the root. I'll tell it to, rather than display the same root, display root 2. So that I hope that it says I am a blue car followed by I am a red car. And we can keep it a little bit differentiate it just a little bit. Wherever it says I am a blank car in the last part, which is the red one, I'll add the word and, comma, I am a red car. So now I have this complete code. First one using a constructor, and the second one using props to change the state of these two separate variables. At this stage, I'm going to save. I'm going to make sure that I can copy and paste this CodePen URL, and that's what I would like for you to turn in for this part of the assignment.